The ninth installment of the F1 Driver Series is centered around one of the elite drivers of the 2010s in Nico Rosberg, who is the son of 1982 Formula 1 champion Nico Rosberg. Nico Rosberg got into karting at the very young age of 6 and would stay in karting for a decade. In fact, the Nico Rosberg and Lewis Hamilton rivalry kinda began in karting, as in 2000, Rosberg finished runner-up to Lewis Hamilton in the Formula A European Championship. But of course at the time, they were best friends. Rosberg's actual racing career started in 2001, where he briefly competed in the Formula BMW Junior Cup, before making the jump to the Formula BMW ADAC in 2002, where Rosberg dominated the field, becoming champion of the 2002 season and winning 9 out of a possible 20 races. Additionally, he did his first F1 testing for Williams the same year, and would continue to do this for 4 years. He'd then make a further jump to what was considered at the time to be the third tier of racing in the Formula 3 Euro Series. Competing in his father's team, he did very well, considering that he was one of the youngest drivers in the field, as he finished 8th in the 2003 standings and also managed to win a race. He'd further improve in 2004 in virtually the same car, where he'd win 3 races and finish on the podium 5 times overall, as he clawed his way to 4th in the standings, beating out childhood friend Lewis Hamilton with just 2 points separating the pair. 2005 saw Rosberg getting promoted to the GP2 series. Although Rosberg got off to a bit of a rocky start in GP2, he'd steady himself and get into a head-to-head championship battle with Heikki Kovalainen for the majority of the season. But 2 wins in the final round of the season in Bahrain was enough to see Rosberg clinch the 2005 GP2 title, beating out Kovalainen 120 points to 105. This impressive feat saw Rosberg make the ultimate step into Formula 1 in 2006, signing a 5-year contract with the Williams team, partnering up with Australian teammate Mark Webber. He impressed on debut with a 7th place finish in Bahrain, and despite back-to-back retirements straight after, Rosberg didn't have to wait too long to score points again with another 7th place finish, this time though at the European Grand Prix. However, Rosberg would not score points again in 2006, as he would retire in 7 of the remaining 13 races due to either reliability issues or driver error. Rosberg ended up finishing 17th in the championship with 4 points to his name, compared to teammate Webber's 15th place with 7 points. Although Webber was the better driver out of the two as expected, Rosberg held his own and did what he could in a poor Williams car, who had split up from BMW the year before. Williams switched to Toyota engines in 2007, and it proved to be a good move, as Rosberg's performances drastically improved. Although he only had 2 points finishes for the first 10 races of the season, with a 6th and 7th place at Australia and Spain. He'd finish in the top 8 for 5 of the final 7 races of the season, which was highlighted with a 4th place finish at the Brazilian Grand Prix. Rosberg was better than experienced teammate Alexander Wurz, albeit that Wurz did have a 3-4 race stretch in the first half of the year where he outperformed Rosberg. But it was no contest in qualifying, as Rosberg beat Wurz 16-1 in qualifying, and it would have surely been 17-1 if Wurz didn't retire before the Brazilian Grand Prix. Rosberg honestly had a really solid season in 2007, so it was no surprise that he was getting linked to the likes of Renault and McLaren. Rosberg finished 9th with 20 points to his name overall. 2008 saw Rosberg and Williams take a step back from 2007 performances. It did start with a lot of sunshine, as Rosberg claimed his first career podium in Formula 1 with a 3rd place finish in the opening race of the season in Australia. For the next 13 races, Rosberg would only score 3 more points, with 4 points finishes being the 3 8th place finishes. But it has got to be said that Rosberg made a catalogue of errors during this stretch, notably in the Monaco Grand Prix, where he crashed out, and the Canadian Grand Prix, where he crashed into Hamilton, who had already crashed into Raikkonen in the pit lane. The inaugural Singapore Grand Prix brought the most joy to Rosberg's season, claiming his then career best finish of 2nd position, and was probably unlucky not to win if not for a 10-second stop-go penalty for going into the pit lane when it was closed and getting screwed over by Crashgate. Rosberg didn't do much in the final 3 races of the year and finished 13th in the championship with 17 points in what was a disappointing year for the German. However, Rosberg was comfortably better than new teammate Kazuki Nakajima in both qualifying and race situations, as Nakajima finished 15th with 8 fewer points. 2009 was to be a wonderful season for Rosberg and was easily his best season yet. He finished 6th and 8th in the opening 2 races in Australia and Malaysia before setbacks in China and Bahrain seeing him finish outside the points. Rosberg would then go on a great run, albeit helped massively with the controversial double diffuser, finishing in the points in the next 8 races, which was highlighted with 2 4th place finishes back-to-back in Germany and Hungary. The final 5 races of the 2009 season won't be races that Rosberg will look back in fondness, as he only finished in the points once with a 5th place finish, which was still an impressive result for him despite the drop-off in final races. Ultimately though, it was a great season for Rosberg as he achieved a 7th place finish in the championship with 34.5 points and dominated Nakajima in comparison, who couldn't score a single point. At the turn of a new decade, Rosberg would drive for a new team in Mercedes after being signed by the manufacturer in October 2009, although he was originally signed by Braun GP since the team was running with that name at the time when they signed Rosberg. His teammate would be 7-time world champion Michael Schumacher, who made his comeback into Formula 1 after a 3-year absence. He had a superb start to the season with 2 5th place finishes to start the season, which was then added with 2 3rd place finishes at both Malaysia and China. He'd keep consistently finishing in the points, which was highlighted with another 3rd place finish in the British Grand Prix and 4th position at Abu Dhabi. Rosberg's only 2 retirements came from things out of his control, with a rear tyre not attached to the car in a pit stop in Hungary, and Webber taking Rosberg out during a spin in Korea. Rosberg finished 7th in the standings, just like in 2009, but was very unlucky not to make the top 6. Rosberg finished with 142 points due to the new points format in place. This was nearly double the tally of Schumacher's 72 points, which was good for 9th. So it's safe to say that Rosberg clearly had the better of the head-to-head stats. 2011 didn't see fortunes improve for Rosberg, and if anything, performance fell off a little compared to 2010. After failing to score points in the opening 2 races with a retirement and a 12th place finish, he'd then achieve his best results in back-to-back races, finishing 5th in both China and Turkey. However, the 5th place in China may have left a slightly bitter taste since he did lead in this race. Although Rosberg would keep finishing in the points regularly, he'd never finish above 6th for the remainder of the season. Although he and Schumacher were easily the best of the midfield bunch, they just couldn't crack into the top 3 of Red Bull, McLaren and Ferrari for the most part. Rosberg finished 7th in the championship for a 3rd consecutive year, while Schumacher finished 1 place down. Rosberg might have dominated Schumacher in qualifying for 2011, but the points gap was a lot closer this time around, with Rosberg scoring 89 points compared to Schumacher's 76 points. But Rosberg scored 53 fewer points than in 2010, which also featured 19 races on the calendar. 2012 was a year of inconsistency for Rosberg, but there would be some great highs as well. Like last year, Rosberg had a poor start to the season, doing little in the opening 2 races, but then he would have one of his greatest weekends at the Chinese Grand Prix, where Rosberg claimed pole position and would get off to a good start and keep the lead. Unlike some of his rivals who went for 3 stops, Rosberg went long with 2 stops and he hung on to clinch his first ever Formula 1 win. This was the first win for Mercedes since 1955 and was the first time ever a German driver won with a German manufacturer. Just 6 weeks later, after a 5th and 7th place finish, Rosberg would put in another hugely impressive drive to finish 2nd and only finished about 6/10ths back on race winner Mark Webber. At this stage of the season, after 6 races, Rosberg was only 17 points behind then championship leader Fernando Alonso. While the next 8 races brought home consistent points finishes, Rosberg could not do better than 5th, which was achieved at Singapore in this stretch. The final 6 rounds of the season were a complete disaster, with 3 of those 6 races seeing Rosberg retire from collisions, with the most memorable one being the one with Kart the Cayenne. The other 3 races saw Rosberg score no points. Rosberg finished 9th in the championship with 93 points, which was more than last year, but thanks to a more competitive field, this caused Rosberg to finish lower in the standings. But like the other years, Rosberg was comfortably better than Schumacher, who finished 13th with 49 points in a year where Mercedes really lacked engine power and were more suited to tracks with slow speed corners. As Schumacher retired at the end of 2012, he would be replaced by Lewis Hamilton for the 2013 season and beyond, as the Rosberg-Hamilton rivalry was about to truly start. Rosberg only finished in one of the opening 3 races with a 4th place finish in Malaysia and was denied a chance to overtake Hamilton due to team orders, leaving Rosberg frustrated. As we know, this wasn't the only controversial event in this race involving team orders. Did somebody say multi-21? Rosberg would then go on a run of getting 3 consecutive pole positions, and although he couldn't convert them to wins in Bahrain and Spain, he did convert pole to a win at the Monaco Grand Prix in an excellent display. He'd win again 2 races later at Silverstone, benefiting from a Sebastian Vettel retirement and holding off a fast finishing Mark Webber. He would then go on to finish in the points in every single race for the rest of the year, barring one race at the Hungaroring, where he had an engine failure, with the 2 best races in this patch a 2nd place finish in India and a 3rd place finish the week after in Abu Dhabi. Although Rosberg was outqualified by Hamilton and scored fewer points with Nico's 171 to Hamilton's 189, which were good for 6th and 4th in the standings, I actually thought Nico had the better season and would have probably finished with more points than Hamilton had he not had 2 more retirements than Hamilton through no fault of his own. But overall, they did have a good head-to-head scrap. 2014 was the first time that Rosberg had a genuine opportunity to win a F1 championship, as Mercedes now had the quickest car on the track going into the new hybrid era of racing. This is where the Rosberg-Hamilton rivalry would really kick off. Rosberg drew first blood, dominating the Australian Grand Prix, leading every lap, while Hamilton had to retire with a lost cylinder on his engine. Rosberg finished 2nd in the next 4 races, but unfortunately for him, Hamilton came first in these 4 races, including the intriguing Bahrain Grand Prix, which is now remembered as the duel in the desert for their intense battle. Rosberg striked back, winning 3 of the next 5 races at Monaco, Austria, and Germany, and after a 2nd place finish at Spa, Rosberg was leading the championship from Hamilton by 29 points. However, 4 second place finishes in the next 5 races with a retirement at the Singapore Grand Prix did not really help Rosberg's championship chances, as Lewis Hamilton scored maximum points in his 5 Grand Prix, meaning that Hamilton now took the lead by 24 points. Rosberg clawed back at the Brazilian Grand Prix to win and give himself a slim chance of taking the championship at the final race at Abu Dhabi. The stupid double point system that was in place for 2014 gave Rosberg a chance, while Hamilton had to finish at least 2nd to clinch the title. Rosberg qualified on pole position, but Rosberg lost the lead at the first corner to Hamilton and lost power in his engine halfway through the race as his ERS failed, sealing his fate and finished 14th. Rosberg finished runner-up in the championship with 317 points, which was 67 points back to Hamilton, who had 384 points, with a sizable gap hugely thanks to the double points rule. Rosberg did win the first ever pole trophy though, for having the most pole positions with 11 in 2014. In 2015, Rosberg failed to begin the season with any wins, with the opening 4 races of the season with 2 second and 2 third place finishes, as Hamilton won 4 out of 4 races to begin the season. Rosberg redeemed his mistake in the Bahrain Grand Prix, where he relinquished 2nd to Kimi Räikkönen with back-to-back wins in Spain and Monaco, with the Monaco win hugely thanks to a poor strategy call by Mercedes for Hamilton, and additionally would also win in Austria after a 2nd place finish at Canada to move within 10 points from Hamilton. But this is as close as Rosberg would get to Hamilton, as Rosberg would only finish on the podium in 4 of the next 8 races, as a mix of underwhelming performance, poor luck, and reliability problems hampered Rosberg, and when Hamilton won his 6th race in the same 8-race stretch, Rosberg could no longer catch Hamilton for the championship, and infamously threw a podium hat at Hamilton. Rosberg did win the final 3 races, but it didn't really matter too much for him now, as he saw Hamilton win the championship 381 points to 322 and won the quali count 12-7. Rosberg and Hamilton made further history as they helped Mercedes clinch the most 1-2s in F1 history with 12 for the season, beating their previous record of 11 last season. In 2016, it was clear to everyone that Nico Rosberg was on a mission, winning the first 4 races of the season in convincing fashion. Tensions between Rosberg and Hamilton further escalated at the 5th race of the year, where they crashed into one another at the opening lap of the Spanish Grand Prix, causing both to retire. Rosberg couldn't bounce back as well, with 7th in a reigning Monaco and 5th in Canada thanks to a puncture and a spin at the end of the race. He'd win again in Baku, but then at Austria took the rivalry to the next level when Hamilton and Rosberg clashed on the final lap, as Hamilton looked to overtake Rosberg, with Rosberg getting front ring damage, dropping to 4th while Hamilton went on to win. Rosberg failed to win the next 3 races while Hamilton went 3 for 3, and after the German Grand Prix was leading Rosberg by 19 points in the standings. Rosberg then went on a streak himself, winning 3 consecutive races and 4 of the next 5 races, albeit with help from Hamilton's engine failure in Malaysia. Rosberg was now leading the championship by 33 points at the conclusion of the Japanese Grand Prix with 4 races to go and was in control of the championship. And even though Hamilton went on to win the next 3 races before the final race of the season, Rosberg's 3 second place finishes in the same stretch meant he still held a 12-point lead going into the last race of the season. Rosberg would start in 2nd, while Hamilton was on pole for Abu Dhabi and held the lead for the majority of the race. But towards the end of the race, Hamilton made a deliberate attempt to perform slower lap times in order to get the likes of Vettel and Verstappen to bunch up with the Mercedes pair and made things intense in the final stages. But Rosberg would not be denied, as he crossed the finish line 2nd to win the 2016 Formula 1 Championship by just 5 points, 385 points to Hamilton's 380. 5 days after winning the championship, Rosberg would announce his retirement from racing to the shock of the F1 community. His career stats definitely weigh up against the top tier drivers with 23 wins, 57 podiums and 30 pole positions, but most of all, he is a F1 champion. After his retirement from racing, he has gone on to start his own driver academy named Rosberg Young Drivers Academy to help develop young drivers in karting. He is also an investor in Formula E as well as in sustainable practices, and he occasionally works for Sky Sport as an analyst. In conclusion, it is clear to see that Nico Rosberg was an immensely talented driver and will always be known as one of only 3 drivers to win a championship in the 2010s. You get the feeling if Rosberg was still in F1, things would be a lot harder for Lewis Hamilton in his quest to become the most successful driver ever, but he did reach his goal of becoming a F1 champion, and that in his view was everything he wanted to do, and I think everyone needs to respect this. And that is the F1 Driver Files episode about Nico Rosberg. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more content, and let me know which driver you want me to do next for the F1 Driver Files.